coming up on The World Today. Early data from U.S. company Moderna shows a new vaccine that protects against COVID-19 is nearly 95% effective. Michigan and Washington state clamped down as U.S. coronavirus cases passed the 11 million mark. Plus, 4 to stand trial in France over a 2015 plot to attack Americans on a high-speed train. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia. We began with some positive news as early data from U.S. company Moderna shows that a new vaccine protects against COVID-19 is nearly 95% effective. The results come hot on the heels of similar results from Pfizer and add to growing confidence that vaccines can help end the pandemic. Both companies use a highly innovative and experimental approach to designing their vaccines. Moderna says it is a great day and they plan to apply for approval to use the vaccine in the next few weeks. However, experts say this is still early data and key questions remain unanswered. In other developments, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is self-isolating after coming into contact with an MP who later tested positive for coronavirus. He says he feels great and thinks vaccines could be distributed to those in need, perhaps before Christmas. Here's more on this and other developments on our COVID-19 Global Update.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson posted a video message on his Twitter account in which he says he's perfectly well after coming into contact with someone with COVID-19. He adds that he'll drive the government forward via Zoom while he self-isolates for 2 weeks in Downing Street.
Hi folks, the good news is that NHS Test and Trace is working ever more efficiently. The bad news is that they've pinged me and I've got to self-isolate because somebody I was in contact with a few days ago has developed COVID. And it doesn't matter that we were all doing social distancing. It doesn't matter that I'm fit as a butcher's dog, feel great. So many people do in my circumstances. And actually, it doesn't matter that I've had the disease and I'm bursting with antibodies.
Meanwhile, Health Minister Matt Hancock says Britain expects to start rolling out the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine just before Christmas if it's declared safe and effective.
Well, it's good news that another vaccine is being tested now in the UK. That's the Janssen vaccine, but that's some months off because it's just starting its phase 3 clinical trials. The Pfizer vaccine, and we're working very closely with the company, and of course we'll be ready to roll it out as soon as it comes. We'll be ready from the 1st of December. But I that's the earliest it could possibly come. Everything would have to go right for that to happen.
In Russia, the country reported a record 22,778 new daily coronavirus cases on Monday as the authorities in Moscow turned to a temporary hospital built inside an ice rink to handle the influx of COVID-19 patients. The country of about 145 million people has started opening temporary clinics and repurposing hospitals in the capital and other cities to relieve the strain on its medical system. Outside Europe, South Australia reported 14 new coronavirus cases on Monday, a rapid spike in the state's first outbreak since April, prompting officials to impose social distancing restrictions. Dozens of people queued at pop-up testing centers as a cluster prompted some other Australian states to reimpose strict quarantine measures on anybody arriving from South Australia just days after Prime Minister Scott Morrison said he expected all internal borders to be open by Christmas. South Australia authorities first reported 3 locally acquired COVID-19 cases on Sunday, saying the outbreak was caused by a worker from a quarantine hotel infecting family members. By Monday, case numbers had jumped to 17. Finally, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has ordered a tightening of state emergency anti-coronavirus systems in the face of the worldwide pandemic as he presided over a meeting of the Politburo of the ruling Workers' Party. Making his first public appearance in 25 days, Kim stressed the need to keep a high alert and intensify efforts in anti-epidemic work. North Korea had tested over 12,000 people and reported no confirmed cases of the coronavirus as of early November, according to the World Health Organization. A total of 6,173 people, 8 of whom were foreigners, were detected as suspected cases, and 174 people were quarantined in the last week of October.
For more on this, we are now being joined by our correspondent in London, Juliana Olayinka. Juliana, another COVID-19 scare for Boris Johnson, but he insists that he feels great. What more can you tell us at this moment?
Well, this latest development has thrown the government into a fresh round of chaos. It's just not great timing, particularly if you realise that England is actually in the middle of a second national lockdown. And although the Prime Minister has insisted he can run the country by Zoom, I don't think his critics will agree with him. Just to bring you up to speed, last week, Thursday morning, the Prime Minister had a breakfast meeting with an MP named Lee Anderson, who looks after a constituency of Ashfield. I believe the meeting lasted 35 minutes, and there is an image circulating on social media at the moment which does show Boris Johnson with this said MP. And although there is a little bit of space between them, it's certainly not the 2 meters, which is what the government proposed, and they are not wearing face masks. Now, this Lee Anderson is said to have developed symptoms the following day on Friday. He tested on Saturday, and he was positive on Sunday. So just to follow and keep in line with the government guidelines, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has decided to self-isolate, which he will be doing for 14 days above the shop, in the flat above the shop, number 11 Downing Street, away from his 8-month-old baby Wilfred and his fiancée Carrie Simons. Now, of course, this has blown up a lot of questions about whether or not Downing Street is COVID secure. We know that back in March, we almost lost our Prime Minister. He spent 3 nights in ICU having oxygen pumped into him because he had COVID-19. So there are lots of questions asking whether or not the Prime Minister is taking this seriously enough, and whether or not the rules and regulations about COVID-19 are being fully complied with in number 10.
Well, number 10 had promised a series of critical announcements in the next fortnight. Do we have any idea what announcements are, and how is the government's response to the pandemic going to be affected with the Prime Minister and some other MPs in isolation?
Well, as the end of the year draws nigh, we are expecting some announcements from the government. But of course, a lot of this has changed because over the weekend we had that pretty shocking news of Dominic Cummings, the very senior aide, pretty well known amongst our viewers in Britain. He has resigned. He's stepped down alongside Lee Keynes, who was Prime Minister Boris Johnson's chief communications advisor. So there appears to be that there may be a reset button being hit in Downing Street. But of course, this has now been thrown into chaos because Boris Johnson has to self-isolate in number 11. But some of the suggestive changes are the Northern Red Wall. This is the famous Red Wall that did belong, of course, to the Labour opposition party, but it was completely crumbled in the last general election. Boris Johnson did campaign under a guise of levelling up the country, providing lots of infrastructure to some places which have been described as derelict or underfunded or abandoned by the government. But of course, before we went into this national lockdown, a lot of these constituencies were put into tiered restrictions, which meant that they were not receiving the funding and they were not able to provide for their businesses. So Boris Johnson was to meet them. Not sure how that meeting will pan out now. There's also a 10-point environment plan that we're expecting to hear about later in the week. Boris Johnson is really keen to make Britain one of the world leaders in tackling the climate emergency. We're also hosting COP26, which is a UN climate summit. It was supposed to take place this month, but of course, COVID-19 has scuppered those plans. But that's been pushed back to next year, I believe, February. And what we are expecting, which is what was announced earlier this week, is the ban of petrol and diesel cars. It was supposed to be banned in 2040. Then they've pushed it to 2035. Apparently, there's an ambitious plan of putting it to 2030. And last but not least, the most crucial of matters is Brexit. We are just a couple of weeks before the end of that famous transition period at the end of this year. Negotiations are still ongoing. A deadline after deadline has been missed. Lord Frost, he is the chief negotiator for Britain. He will be in Brussels later today. He could be there now, speaking to Michel Barnier for the EU. There are still contentious issues remaining on both sides. The government here do insist there can be a deal, but of course, time is running out.
Well, Juliana, all hopes are on the development of a vaccine. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says one could be distributed to those most in need by Christmas. How likely is this, and are people prepared to get vaccinated? What are you hearing?
Well, will a vaccine be distributed by Christmas? That is the hope. It's possibly unlikely. The Labour opposition leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has said to the government that there has to be some sort of emergency plans in place to try and roll out these doses of the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine, because it's going to be a tremendously difficult distribution effort. I believe the British government have secured 40 million doses. This is going to be enough for 20 million people, and trying to decide who will and who will not get that vaccine is going to be of the utmost importance. But I think it's really important to make clear that until it gets the regulatory go-ahead, that vaccine isn't going anywhere. We've had news this morning, haven't we, about another breakthrough, which is 94.5% effective. This is Moderna, another giant pharmaceutical company in the US. Unfortunately for the British government, we haven't purchased any early dosages of that. But according to sources, we'll be able to access 1 billion doses next year, January. But I suppose in terms of vaccine news in the UK, one of the biggest stories is about these two mega sites of testing. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, is hoping to double the capacity so that more than 1 million tests can take place a day. Although the vaccine certainly has signalled the end of the fear of the virus, testing still is one of the only ways of trying to track it, trying to isolate individuals. So the announcement today of these two mega labs is hoping that it will take the government to being a position where it can start eradicating the spread of the virus.
All right. Well, Juliana, thanks so much for that. Meanwhile, Michigan and Washington are the latest U.S. states to bring in strict measures to try and curb the spread of COVID-19. High schools and colleges are to halt on-site teaching, and restaurants are prohibited from offering indoor dining in Michigan from Wednesday. Indoor restaurant dining is also banned in Washington state, and gyms, cinemas, theaters, and museums will close. COVID cases have now topped 11 million in the United States, with hospital admissions at record levels. On average, more than 1,000 people a day are dying with the virus, and the overall death toll is close to 250,000. We'll have more of that when we get back from the break, but still to come on the program. British celebrity photographer Rankin wants you to talk about death in his latest project. Details in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks so much for staying with us. As we did mention before the break, Michigan and Washington are the latest U.S. states to bring in strict measures to try and curb the spread of COVID-19. At this point, on average, more than 1,000 people a day are dying with the virus, and the overall death toll is close to 250,000. Let's head over to Washington, D.C. now, where our correspondent Maria Bird is on standby for more. Maria, welcome to the program. So the Biden administration has been drumming up the theme of getting to action fast. The president-elect's chosen chief of staff served under Obama to handle Ebola. So he seems like the right man for the job considering the climate that we're in. But just how much impact is the Trump administration's refusal to concede going to have on Mr. Biden's transition plans and his response to this pandemic?
Well, it's very interesting to watch how this is all transpiring, because it's almost as if you have two governments running at one time. You have those who are planning, which are in the Biden-Harris administration. They are obviously putting all types of plans in place. They are working with various private sector industries, as you've mentioned, the vaccines. So they're working to try to ensure that they are prepared and ready. The greatest challenge, though, is that they are not able to work side by side with the Trump administration to ensure that the information flow is clear, it's direct, and it's strategic. As yesterday, Dr. Fauci announced that we could see another 200,000 deaths by the spring if we do not get a handle on the virus, even with a vaccine. And he furthermore stated that he has had no communication with the Biden-Harris administration and no one with the coronavirus task force. And so we are talking about one of the leading infectious disease doctors in the country, and obviously a very integral part of the Trump administration's coronavirus task force, not having had conversations with those in the Biden administration. We are definitely looking at potentially some major challenges when they try to implement their plan, because their plan is only as good as the information they have. And so I think Biden-Harris administration is working hard to get the best people within their task force and within their coronavirus planning and execution. But again, it's only going to be as good as the information that they know as to the actual current situation within the U.S. today.
Well, let's talk about the ongoing response to the pandemic now. New measures have been imposed in Washington and Michigan. So how are people in these states reacting to this? And just how critical is the situation at this stage?
One of the leading advisors of the Trump administration is telling people in Michigan to rise up against this. And so obviously we have varying sides. There are those individuals who are very concerned about the increase in the number of cases across the country. Just in the past week, we've had over 1 million cases, new cases in just 1 week. And so, there's many that are concerned. And so states are taking their own action and local governments are taking their own actions because the federal government has not taken an oversweeping response to this increase in cases. And so there are those who are comforted by their states taking control, but others who are strong supporters of the president. We have to remember over 72 million people voted for President Trump. So there are individuals in these states that are not happy with these restrictions. As Chicago has a stay-at-home order in place right now. We're expecting Philadelphia to come out with one later today. So you will start to see these restrictions going back to phase one being implemented across the country.
Well, Maria, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us some more clarity on the situation there. Do stay safe.
Thank you for having me.
Meanwhile, U.S. President-elect Joe Biden's incoming chief of staff says the federal government needs to sign off on transition team efforts this week so that Biden's team can receive national security briefings and address COVID-19. Klain was once tapped by Democratic President Barack Obama to safeguard the United States from the threat of a lethal virus. As President-elect Joe Biden's chief of staff, he will take on a similar mission. In 2014, Obama named Klain to serve as the Ebola czar after an outbreak in West Africa that ended up killing thousands around the globe. All in all, only 11 people were treated in the United States for the virus, and 2 people died.
It's accepted as a further confirmation of the reality that Joe Biden won the election, and not through any of the rest of that tweet, not through fraud or anything else the president is baselessly alleging. He won because he got more votes. Okay, that's why he won. He got more votes in the popular vote by a lot, and he won the same number of electoral votes that President Trump himself called a landslide 4 years ago. But look, if the president's prepared to begin to recognize that reality, that's positive. Donald Trump's Twitter feed doesn't make Joe Biden president or not president. The American people did that. What we really want to see this week, Chuck, is the General Services Administration issue that ascertainment so we can start to do the kinds of things you and I talked about a few minutes ago. Meet with these vaccine officials, kind of get the intelligence briefings for the president-elect, the vice president-elect. That's really the measure of how this is moving forward this week, I think. Look, he's not the president now. There's not that much that Joe Biden can do right now to change things other than to reiterate kind of the message you heard from Dr. Osterholm, which is that all Americans and our state and local governments need to step up right now. If the president, the administration is not going to lead, that's where the leadership has to come from. That will change on January 20th. But right now we have a crisis. It's getting worse. You know, we had never had a day with 100,000 cases in a single day until last week. By next week, we may see 200,000 cases in a single day. So this is getting much worse, Chuck.
And finally on the program, celebrity photographer Rankin is well known for his iconic images of supermodels, music and film stars, and even Britain's Queen Elizabeth. But for his latest exhibition, he has chosen a topic that seems tailor-made for a world in the midst of a pandemic: death. Francis McGuire has reported this. Rankin wants to break taboos with his new work and encourage people to feel more comfortable talking about death.
Titled Lost for Words, the digital exhibition sees Rankin joining forces with mutual life insurance company Royal London to tackle the taboo around death. Conceived well before the start of the coronavirus crisis, the pandemic has made the exhibition even more urgent.
The two things that happen to everybody is you're born and you die. We all talk about birth like it's going out of fashion. None of us talk about death. You know, death is something that we just want to put into a closet and, you know, forget about it. And it's most of the time it's because we're scared about it.
Lost for Words is composed of a series of portraits shot by Rankin featuring a range of people superimposed onto images of their deceased loved ones. Accompanying the photographs are video interviews in which Rankin subjects share their personal experiences of loss and grief.
Some of them are famous, some of them have set up blogs, some of them have set up communities on Facebook. So it's different people who have actually almost kind of lent into the subject matter of grief and death and have been vocal about it. And what's brilliant is that when they speak about it, there's no shame, there's no fear, they're not freaked out by it. They're used to talking about it, and so therefore they really can give you some great advice.
Posing for the celebrity photographer in October was mother of four from London, Vida Wickramaratne, who lost her 17-year-old son, Daniel, to COVID-19 in April.
Talking about death and grief is very important as part of your grief journey, because I think the key to dealing with grief is communication. I think you can't hide grief in a box and close it up and put it away. It's always going to stay with you. It's how you deal with it and who you actually invite to be part of your grief journey to help you through it.
54-year-old Rankin is no stranger to grief himself. Losing his parents in a short time period prompted the photographer to put together his 2013 death-related exhibition titled Alive in the Face of Death, which centered around people with terminal illnesses and the celebration of life.
Well, that's all for The World Today. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.